and welcome to Health Live at Seniors today. It's a bright and sunny April evening rather. And we are delighted to have here with us Dr. Kersi Chavda, who's a very well-known psychiatrist, a senior psychiatrist, who is practicing at the RD Hinduja National Hospital in Mumbai, in Mumbai. And we've invited him to speak about an interesting topic, which is, of course, something that we're all looking for, which is positive outlook, healthy body, strengthening emotional foundations for active senior living. But before I invite him to speak, I'll just introduce him. Dr. Kersi Chavda is, as I mentioned, a consultant at the Hinduja Hospital and Medical Research Center in Mumbai. He is a past president of the Bombay Psychiatrist Society. He has been and currently is chairperson of the task force of the Indian Psychiatric Society dealing with school psychiatry and counseling. He's currently advisor to the Indian Psychiatrics, as I mentioned, with the school psychiatry. He was chairperson of the task force of the IPS dealing with the LGBTQ community. And he managed to issue a position statement that was quoted in fairly landmark judgments when they repealed Section 377. He was a panel. He has been chairperson of the IPS TF dealing with media relations. Field of interest is kids. And today he's going to be speaking to us senior citizens and about a topic, as I mentioned, which is positive outlook, healthy body, strengthening emotional foundations for active senior living. Welcome to Health Live at Seniors Today, Doctor.
Thank you.
So I'm going to invite Doctor to speak. He's going to be speaking for around 10-15 minutes. And then after that, he will be addressing questions that you have. You can put them in the chat window. We have, as we speak, around 125, 130 people who are live just now. And there'll be more who will perhaps join in even as we speak. And there are people who are live as well as on YouTube. So, Doctor, over to you. Dr. Kersi Chavda is, I must mention here, and it's important to mention here because he's a medical, he's an MBBS, MD, and a fellow of in the field of psychology, FAPA, if I remember right. And so, there are psychologists and psychiatrists, and he's a psychiatrist, so he's a doctor who prescribes medicines as well, just to kind of, differentiate the two category of people we have in this field. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to talk to you guys. So basically, when we talk in terms of psychiatry, a lot of people say that why should we have a psychiatrist talking to us, because there's nothing wrong with us. Things have changed since I was a medical student. Today, our OPDs are full. So obviously, people are meeting us more and more. People are asking us more and more. There is more reporting. There is more awareness, which is very good. Because in today's generation, it is silly for us to be in a situation where we suffer because we are depressed or anxious or have OCD or whatever else. For the senior person, it becomes a little more difficult at times because a lot of people who have symptoms, their family members will say, oh, it's just because you're getting old. It's just an aging process. Nothing has to be done, accept it, etc., etc. And in today's generation, we don't have to accept it. Yes, of course, to some extent, there is an aging process. The brain is going to become a little smaller. There will be some infarcts in the brain, etc., etc. But there's a huge amount of things that can be done to make life better so that you don't really need to suffer. What are the commonest kinds of psychiatric problems? Probably the most important is the one which is the commonest, which is depression. So you have depression in the young, you have depression in middle age, you have depression in the old age. And when we are talking of depression, we are basically talking of a person who doesn't seem to have any enjoyment in life. So I used to read the paper, but I no longer enjoy that. I used to watch television. I used to go for a walk. I used to love playing cards at the club, but all of that has stopped. I wake up in the morning feeling terrible. I wonder why I'm alive. I have this feeling of hopelessness, helplessness, uselessness, which makes it worse when people tell me things like, oh, come for a walk with us, you'll feel better. See this movie, you'll feel better. And it makes me feel even worse when they tell me things like, what do you have to be depressed about? Your kids are living with you. They're looking after you. you have a lot of money, you go abroad once a year, etc., etc. All of this is absolutely immaterial. It's like telling a person who has diabetes, how can you have diabetes? You're a rich person and you go abroad once a year. So that doesn't make sense. It is an illness, and that illness has to be treated like any other illness. The frightening thing about depression, of course, is suicidal attempts. When you reach a stage where you feel that there's nothing left in this world, when you reach a stage where you feel that what's the point of living? I'm just making everybody around me unhappy. When I die, people will cry for a little bit and then they'll get on with their lives. When they see me in the state that I am right now, they're going to suffer 1,000 deaths. So it's better that I die and everybody else, over a period of time, gets over it and are happy. And when you get into that situation and you attempt suicide, that's sad, because all of these things, by and large, are avoidable. All of these are controllable. So technically, suicide should not happen. The hassle is, when I was a medical student many, many years ago, we would say that the commonest age at which suicide occurred, it still occurs, is at the time of teenage. So that's terrible when you have a 15, 16, 17-year-old who kills himself or herself. But we have a huge number of senior citizens also who can't cope with whatever is happening to them, who feel lonely, who feel, there's nobody giving them the respect that they used to get when they were working. There's the emptiness syndrome when their family leaves them. The kids go abroad. The kids love them, but they can only come 1 month in a year. So the remaining 11 months, they're alone. So you start wondering what is happening. Why is it happening like this? Then you'll end up having physical ailments. You might end up having financial issues, and all of that causes a problem. One of the other very, very common things that we see in general, and also in particular as you grow older, is anxiety. Now, I think all of us are very anxious during COVID, but in general, we have something where you feel this feeling of impending doom, that something bad is going to happen. You feel that there's going to be an issue where you're going to land up doing something bad, or because of you, something bad is going to happen. Or you have this problem in speaking in public, which we call social anxiety. Or you have this problem where you can't get into a lift, or you can't get into a closed room, which we say is a claustrophobic issue, also severe anxiety. And all of these are problematic. Imagine getting up and constantly wondering when something bad is going to happen. You don't let your kids leave because you say if they get out, they'll be knocked down. You don't let people live a normal life. You just constantly are calling them, checking on them, which can be very irritating to all concerned and can be a problem. The ultimate of anxiety is what we call a panic attack. So when you have a panic attack, you'll end up having things where you feel you're going to have a heart attack. But the only thing is that the attack does not start from the heart, it starts from the brain. So you'll end up having palpitation where your heart goes thuk, 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 thuk. You'll end up having a problem with breathing. You feel you're going to faint. You feel you're going to not be in a position where people ask you questions and you'll be incoherent. You're rushed to the hospital emergency. They do the tests. And then they tell you that there's nothing wrong with your heart. It's only to do with your brain. And then they'll send you to a psychiatrist who diagnoses a panic attack. A panic attack can be incapacitating. It can be a situation where you're in the middle of an important conversation with somebody, and suddenly you find yourself palpitating, you feel you're staggering, you feel you're going to fall, you get breathless, you go running to the windows, throw them open because you feel you're going to choke. All of these are very, very frightening and can easily be dealt with medication and therapy. When we were in the midst of COVID, one of the things that everybody was told to do is wash your hands. So when you wash your hands, you'll end up having issues related to hygiene. I mean, you just say that I must wash my hands. And when we had COVID, it was wash your hands for at least 30 seconds each time. So then the possibility of transmitting a virus will be less, etc., etc. The hassle is that some people started washing and they started washing and they started washing. So you would spend 6 hours a day in washing, 10 hours a day in washing, And it had to be done in a particular ritualistic way. So maybe you had to wash the tips of your fingers, and then you had to wash up to the wrist, and then you had to wash till the elbow. And if you missed out on that, you had to go to that same ritual over and over again. And you knew that there was something wrong, but you couldn't prevent yourself from doing it. So you have this obsessive feeling with thought, which made you behave in a particular way, which caused a tremendous amount of anxiety. And in order to cope with that, you landed up doing a particular thing, which is called the compulsive action. And you had to do that compulsive action over and over and over again in order to gain control over the anxiety. And that is something that we needed to look at. OCD also very often is in terms of, you walk into a room and you see the pictures on the wall or the paintings on the wall, and they're slightly askew. So you have to put them in a particular way, or you're going to get very, very anxious. Things have to happen in a particular sequence, otherwise you get very anxious. And so on. You have religiosity. Sometimes religion can become an OCD. During the COVID time, people started praying. It's nice. It's nice to be spiritual. But if you pray 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 15 hours a day, and then you get scared and you say that if I don't do this particular prayer in this particular way, this many number of times, God is going to punish me, then that becomes a major problem. And it's called, we have the addictions. Unfortunately, when you grow old, we just believe that the older person cannot have addictions. But we do know that we have this problem associated with alcohol. We do know that we have a problem associated with smoking. We do know that even senior citizens take pot and weed and hash. I know a lot of senior citizens who do coke on a regular basis. So all of them also can have major problems associated with the particular addiction that they have. And then we have to deal with those. The problem is that often when an old man comes to me or an old woman comes to me, I start thinking that he or she is a very good chap. And I may not ask the questions associated with the addiction, which is something wrong. We have to find out whether there is an abuse of a particular substance as well. And then, of course, you have the old age people who land up having specific issues related to age. So you'll end up having problems associated with people living longer and longer age groups. I mean, at one time, we'd all pop it by 50. Today, we live till 80, 90, 100, which is wonderful. But you might be physically okay, but mentally, psychiatry, you'll end up having major problems. And when you end up having these major problems, your brain kind of shrinks to some extent. You might have the deposition of abnormal proteins in a particular area. You might have vascular infarcts in some part of the brain, and depending on which part of the brain, they'll end up having symptoms associated with problems in that particular part. Today, people are looking at Parkinson's. That's become so incredibly common. So you have people with a shuffling gait and a problem with movement where they're constantly shaking like this. And we give them medication, and sometimes the medication can also cause problems over a period of time. But you don't have a choice. We'll end up having neurodegenerative disorders, and the commonest one I see somebody's already written in the question box. You're talking about Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, Alzheimer's is a variety of dementia. Dementia basically means that you have a problem with memory, but very often also an associated problem with behavior. So you have somebody brought to me, a senior citizen, and his daughter or his son tells me, Doc, my dad never used to get angry, but now he's losing his temper all the time. And I say, does he have a loss of memory? And they say, not really, but he's only behaviorally inappropriate. And when we do the tests, we find that there's a huge amount of problems associated only with the fact that he has a problem. And that becomes an issue. So Alzheimer's and dementia become very, very major problems which have to be looked at. We give medication to reduce the pace of the degeneration that occurs. The final level, of course, is that the person may not recognize you, may lose control over urine and stool. So that becomes a major sad thing when we see somebody who's dearly loved and who's brought us up and who might have been extremely intelligent and held very, very important positions reduced to the level that we see happening. So that becomes a major problem. How do we cope with all of this? Before I get into the questions per se, probably the most important thing to do is a lifestyle. Look at our lifestyle. We need to eat properly. So no skipping meals as far as possible. Don't have too much sugar as far as possible, but certainly have it. Hydrate yourself enough. Somebody was asking how much of water should we drink. I normally say 1.5 to 2 liters minimum, but it all depends also on whether you have a cardiac history or whether you have any other illnesses, because then your consulting doctor will be in a position to provide you with specific data as to how much water you are permitted to drink, because maybe your heart is not in a position to pump out as much as a person who doesn't have an heart issue. Or maybe you have edema feet, which is pooling of fluids in your legs so that your legs seem swollen. And then when you press it, you get a kind of a pitting symptom over there, which we call pitting edema. So all of these things have to be dealt with by the consultant doctor, who will then tell you what needs to be done, who will then tell you what needs to be looked at and how much water you're supposed. We are also supposed to be looking at it in terms of what are the things associated with prevention to some extent of degeneration. And probably the most important thing is to stop smoking if you're having it. And I'm talking of stopping it, not having it occasionally, but at least if you can't stop it, then have it occasionally. If you're drinking, then drink, but don't over drink. And there's this debate about whether it's a good idea to have a glass of wine every day. It's still open to the jury. We haven't really reached any conclusions, even though there's a lot of research happening in that. So if you are drinking, restrict your alcohol. If you're not drinking, you don't necessarily have to start it because the book says. Certainly don't have drugs. It's essential that we look after ourselves physically. And when we're saying look after your we look after yourself physically, we're looking at it in terms of also exercise. Probably the most important parameter of good health, even in a senior citizen, is regular physical activity. If you've been regularly active when you were a young, just because you're old, and if you haven't been doing it, it's never too late to start. But of course, start off taking your doctor's advice. If you're not used to physical activity, we don't want you to jump into something strenuous, which might cause a problem physically, or might cause a problem with your heart, or might cause a problem with your respiration. That doesn't make sense. But like I said, the most important parameter of keeping yourself fit, where we are not looking after your blood pressure and your diabetes, which of course has to be done, is to do physical activity on a regular basis. And the rule of thumb seems to be 45 minutes, about 5 days in a week. That seems to be extremely effective. You can walk, run, cycle, swim, play a game, do yoga, go dancing. It doesn't matter what you do. And you don't necessarily have to do the same thing every day. You just have to be physically active. If you have a physical ailment, it is essential to take the appropriate medication. I am appalled at a lot of people who have migraine and they say, oh, I don't take a tablet because I'm going to wait till the end, then it becomes unbearable, I'll take it. And that's being silly. Inflammation happening in your brain. You take one silly tablet, it'll abort that. You don't take it, and that inflammation will go on for a long time period, and you're going to end up having more damage to your brain than if you took that one tablet. Ditto for the medication that psychiatrists give. Everybody is frightened of psychiatrists' medication for some odd reason. I'm going to become a zombie. I'm going to sleep the whole day. I'm going to put on weight. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the other. And that is all absolute, unadulterated nonsense. If there are side effects, the psychiatrist will deal with it. If there is a problem, if you have a problem, then you have to take it. It must be done in a particular way. And for God's sake, do remember that Dr. Google is not a doctor. Dr. Google, I can write anything on it, it will show up. And the number of people who suffer for no reason, who land up having major calamities for no reason because they don't take medication, is stupid. And this whole thing of, I am strong, I don't need it. I really don't know what that means. Supposing you have diabetes, does that make you weak? No, it doesn't. If you have high blood pressure, does it make you weak? No, it doesn't. But if you have depression and you have anxiety, you suddenly become weak. Why? It's an illness. An illness is not a sign of weakness. An illness is a sign of a disease. And if you have a disease, you should take the medication for it. So one of the most important things that we typically do is take the medication if it's necessary. If it is necessary to undergo counseling or therapy, that is also done. But there are times when it is stupid to only go to a counselor. If I'm suicidal and I only go to a counselor, that's being stupid. I will need medication to help me get over it. If I'm psychotic, if I'm seeing things which are not there, if I'm hearing things which are not there, if I'm very aggressive, if I'm beating up people, if I'm breaking things at home, I will need medication. And do realize that, for example, supposing I was an orthopedic doctor and you had a fracture of a leg and you came to me and I said, go do yoga, you'd think I'm an idiot. Thus, even for major psychiatric illnesses, if you come up to me and I say, go do meditation, that's not going to work. Meditation and yoga and whatever else you do is an adjunct to medication. So meditation is not a solution in a lot of cases. It can be used along with medication. It can be used along with therapy. But like I started off by saying, in today's generation, it's almost a crime to allow yourself to suffer when there is so much that is available that you can look after. I've been asked to speak for about 20 minutes and then answer the questions. Mr. Maheshwari, should I just start with the questions that are in the box?
Actually, what I'll do is I'll just post some questions. I've also got some questions by WhatsApp.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
So you did make a mention. This is a question from Shilpi Biswas, who says, Doctor, is dementia and Alzheimer primary symptoms of psychiatric problems?
Yes, they are. By the way, dementia is not a symptom. Dementia is a series of symptoms of a person who behaves in a particular way. The symptom would be a loss of memory or a behavioral issue. So, for example, if you're looking at it in a different perspective, if I have a sniffle in my nose, it's a symptom. If my eyes are watering, it's a symptom. If my throat is sore and I'm coughing, it's a symptom. And together, the disease will be a cold or influenza or something. So just like that, dementia is a series of symptoms.
Right.
But yes, it is a psychiatric illness, very much.
We have two similar questions, one from Girija Ganesh and the other is from Hina Mehta. It says, how does one control oneself from panic attack and how does one avoid anxiety? And another question that I've got on WhatsApp is from a caregiver as to how does one know that one is getting a panic attack?
Okay. I mean, when there's ultimate anxiety, when you're getting a palpitation, when your heart goes thud, 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 when you feel you're going to fall, when you get extremely scared, when you feel you're going to faint, when there's blackness in front of the eyes, when you feel imbalanced, all of those will point to an attack. So if it is not a heart attack, then it's a panic attack. So maybe initially you start thinking that there's something wrong with your heart. But once you know that your heart is normal and that you've checked it out and that there's nothing wrong with it, then you start thinking in terms of the fact that maybe there is something that has triggered off panic. Maybe there's something that has triggered off an enormous amount of stress. And the only way that I could cope is to have this kind of a panic situation. And that is a panic attack. How do you prevent it from happening? Well, you go to a psychiatrist, frankly, and you figure out what are the various triggers that might be causing it. There will be a detailed evaluation done, which includes family history. Of course, through all of this, we would also rule out physical ailments. So there will be a proper cardiovascular evaluation that would be suggested. But most of the time, they come to us after a cardiologist has checked them out and said there's nothing. Occasionally, we might ask for an MRI or a CT, depending on what the situations. Once you're with us, the psychiatrist will give medication to prevent overall anxiety, which will then be tapered off. And he'd probably recommend that you go to a psychologist or a counselor who might suggest relaxation techniques, grounding techniques, etc., which reduce the possibility of a panic attack, reaching the stage of a panic attack. But do realize that none of us are pieces of wood or pieces of stone. So it's not that we are not going to feel anything. It's not that we're going to become numb. It's not that, we're not going to have any emotion. It's just that we won't overreact to things and then land up having the equivalent of a panic attack.
Right. Thank you, doctor. There's a question from Shamla Ravi who asks how to cope with pin strokes in the elderly.
What's a pin stroke? I don't know what a pin stroke is.
I think pins and needles, perhaps. I'm not very sure.
I don't know. If you're talking of pins and needles, then we are looking at, but then why would there be strokes? If you're getting a pin and needles kind of a thing, then the first thing you do is rule out diabetes. If diabetes has been ruled out, then the other thing that we would look at is the possibility of something in terms of a neuropathy. So one of the things that we would do is rule out a neuropathy. And then if everything else has been ruled out, then we think in terms of severe anxiety causing this to happen, or the side effect of some medication. So for example, one of the medicines for migraine is something called Rizact or Risactotriptan. When you have this too often, very often people end up getting tingling and stuff. So like that, there are certain things that we would look at to rule out. And if there is an issue associated with that, then we'll tell you to stop having that medicine and switch to something else. And if not, then we'll give the medication to enable you to control your diabetes or to enable you to reduce the stress which causes you to have pins and needles.
Before I read out the next question, there's just an advisory note here that the session here is advisory in nature.
Yes.
So we would not recommend, if you do have a definite ailment or if you want to discuss something, you must meet a doctor, and that's advisable.
Everybody is an individual. Everybody will have different issues. Right. This is like Mr. Maheshwari said, just advisory. It is not specific.
Having said that, there's a question from Sushma Agarwal who asks, मैं anxiety के लिए depression Deprant Fort लेती हूँ, रोज सही है या harmful तो नहीं है?
नहीं, harmful नहीं है. अगर डॉक्टर साहब ने आपको दिया है, अगर डॉक्टर साहब ने evaluation के बाद आपको दिया है, और अगर आप अच्छी डॉक्टर के पास गए हो, मतलब कोई वैसे मेरी मम्मी ने ये लिया और मेरे डैडी ने ये लिया इसलिए मैं ले रही हूँ, वैसा तो नहीं होना चाहिए. अगर डॉक्टर ने दिया है और तो उसने सोच समझ के ही दिया होगा, और उसकी वजह से मेरा ख्याल है कि आपको चालू रखना है, कंटिन्यू रखना है, और अगर कुछ चेंज करना है या कुछ और करना है तो उसी डॉक्टर के पास जाइए और उनसे सलाह लीजिए. लेकिन ये हार्मफुल जरा भी नहीं है, बहुत अच्छी दवाई.
There's a question from Mukta Garg who's asked, is backache...
you become mute for some reason, sir.
Oh, is it? No, I'm not.
No, now you're fine.
Is Mukta Garg asked, is backache, does it have psychological treatment related to spine?
Yes, very much. Half the backaches, I would say, or even more than that, are psychosomatic in nature. So I have a huge amount of references coming from orthopedic or spine surgeons. What basically happens is that when we become anxious or very depressed or other things, very often you'll end up getting into a position where you'll end up going into muscle spasm. And very often when you get into a muscle spasm, then it's psychiatric medication that will reduce the spasm rather than an actual painkiller or things like that. Of course, painkillers are also used, and the orthopedician will do his own magic with his vitamins and muscle spasm, muscle relaxants and all of that. But often a psychiatric anxiety or depression or other issues can cause you to go into spasms, which cause this backache. Bad posture is, of course, one of the things that we will always look at, and we go into the treatment of all of that.
Right. There is a question that you've already answered. मैं alcohol ले सकता हूँ क्या? Obviously, in moderation. मुझे नींद नहीं आती, डिप्रेशन से आ जाती है. Sushma Agarwal has just said that she doesn't get sleep, but with depression she falls asleep.
Good for her.
Sunita Verma asks, is it to express oneself, writing is better or talking?
Whatever suits you is good. There's no problem. There is a psychological technique called journaling where you're supposed to write down. And in counseling, you talk. Whatever works for you is good.
Right. There is a question, how can I prioritize my emotional needs and set healthy boundaries with others? Anil Singh asks. And there's another question from Meena Goel, who says, I'm very emotional. How do I, get strong?
Okay, so it's impossible to generalize because everybody will have their own ways of reacting. And most of it is related to the way they were brought up and the genetic history that they have and the experiences that they have experienced in the growing up phase till where they are today. So it's impossible for me to talk to you about that. Having said that, if you have the insight that you are being taken for granted or that you're having a problem in laying down boundaries, then do not allow yourself to be taken for granted. Learn to say no. You might need to go to a counselor. You might need to go to a psychiatrist. Occasionally, just saying no can cause so much anxiety that you might need medication in order to say no. I've seen that happen as well. And when you start getting used to it, when you get the practice of it, you'll find that the enormous sensitivity with which you used to react to a particular incident becomes less and you become much more capable of laying down boundaries without feeling guilty as hell. Of course, we should be helpful. Of course, we should do things for others. But it's also okay to treat yourself as the most important person in your life. That is also very important. Very often, a person will be very, very bad with himself. And when I say, supposing your best friend came up to you and told you exactly what you're telling me, what would you say? And he'd come out with a fantastic solution. And I would say, then deal with yourself with that same fantastic solution. But we are very bad on ourselves.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, there's a question which has come in. My son has advised that there are quite a few counseling sessions that are available online. Doctor, what would you advise? Should one go and meet a psychiatrist, or should we approach somebody who is running an online counseling service?
Okay, so my normal recommendation to everybody is that in the hierarchy, the psychiatrist is on top, then you have a counselor or a psychologist, then you have a psychiatric social worker. I would normally advise that if you have an issue, you first go to a psychiatrist. A lot of people who come to me, I say, you don't need medication, go to a counselor. But if they do need medication, then they should take it. So my recommendation to you would be to find a psychiatrist close to you, discuss with him what you want to discuss. If he feels that medication is not necessary, he will then tell you to go to a counselor. Online counseling is also okay. We also do online video consults, etc., provided there is some knowledge of the person who's doing the online counseling. Unfortunately, in today's generation, you have some people who just do 3 months of some course, and then they call themselves counselors and they believe that they can treat you and your problems in life, which is appalling. On the other hand, you have to look at the proper qualifications, the experience, who they're associated with, and you have some fantastic counselors who also do a great job. So online is okay, though I will always say that face-to-face is better. But if you're doing online, just find out what the person is all about before sharing your life story with him.
Right. So this person has said another question saying that online helps because, I can just be incognito.
Okay. While we normally say that it does help, I will still say that there are lots of things that happen on a face-to-face. Lots of cues we look at on a face-to-face thing, which we cannot do if it's on screen. But for example, in COVID, we were only doing online. So works.
Right. There are two more questions, Doctor. One is from Mr. Satish Kalia, who's 79. He says, Doctor prescribed me sodium valproate about 8 months back when I lost balance. I'm feeling okay for the last few months, but hope it's not too harmful.
Not at all. It's a very good drug. And if you're feeling good with it, please continue. You, of course, have to go back and get regular follow-ups with your doctor. So if he's written it for 2 months, don't take it for 2 years. Go back after 2 months. See what he's written and follow up with him. But it's a very good drug.
The other question is about COVID and anxiety, etc. Now, has that happened thanks to it? Is it a side effect of COVID vaccinations?
We don't really know, sir. There's a lot of talk that it might be. There's a lot of talk that people are having cardiac issues much more than what we would expect them to, and maybe it happened because of COVID. There's a lot of talk about allergic reactions happening because of COVID, but nobody knows for sure. So I would be a little wary of blaming it for everything. Possibility is there. Anyway, you can't do anything about it. We've taken it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kersi Chavda, for this session that you've taken. I know you've taken a break and gone to Lonavala from Mumbai. So it's good that you could stay connected. The connections are good, which is good for the country, all of us.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. Thank you to the team at the Hinduja Hospital for facilitating this. And we will be back once again next Saturday at 5 p.m. for another session of Health Live at Seniors Today. Thank you once again to Dr. Kersi Chavda. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Stay safe, stay healthy. Cheers.
Yes.
Bye.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.